Hello everyone, this is dslyecxi. I was recently at the iTech trade show in Rome, and to my surprise, they had the Oculus Rift there. So I spent a bit, probably about, I don't know, 15 minutes total with it on two separate trips. And I thought I'd go ahead and talk about what I saw, what I thought of it, the pros, the cons, and try to do this as evenly and honestly as possible because, as everyone's mostly aware of, there's a lot of hype going on around with this. There's a lot of marketing talk going on. There are many people that seem to believe this is the second coming of Christ. And while it is a very cool product in a lot of respects, there are some, well, there's at least one major flaw. And it's worth talking about it as a complete package and not just sensationalizing it beyond reason or hyping it up to be something that it isn't, at least not yet. So, to start off with, I wanted to talk a little bit about my background with virtual reality and HMD. In my past professional work, I was using VR headsets that would be the various different types of tracking. And we'd have the little HMDs that would be anywhere from 800 to 600 resolution and two eyes to one that was 1280 by 1024. The issues I always had with these and the things that made me skeptical about the Rift at first was one, the color quality of these kind of little micro displays has never been really that good. The contrast ratio is not that great. The field of view isn't really that high. And the responsiveness of the tracking is fairly lacking. You don't, it doesn't immerse you. You get what it's trying to do. You have an impression of what they're going for, but the technical hardware isn't far enough along to really immerse you and convince you of things. So as the Oculus Rift was announced and began to pick up hype and such, people would ask me, what my opinions on it were. And based on my history with this kind of stuff, I was skeptical. Anytime someone comes out and says that this is going to revolutionize everything and it's just the greatest thing, they don't really talk about the flaws of it, or at least not in any kind of capacity that a casual observer like me would notice. It sends off the warning sirens for me. That nothing's perfect. So there was a lot of skepticism on my part. Even as I went to the booth to check this out, I wasn't convinced. So when people ask me what my thoughts on the Oculus are, they typically, because of my relationship with Natural Point and my recommendation of using TrackIR and the fact that I've been using it for Arma since Arma 1, they're always asking me in that kind of context, like, hey, dslyecxi, what do you think of Oculus Rift? Is this going to take over from what TrackIR is doing? Or hey, dslyecxi, have you heard of Oculus Rift? It's totally going to make TrackIR obsolete. And that sort of angle. And I've never really had much to say about it because aside from my skepticism, which I think is a healthy and warranted thing in that situation, I've never used one. It was a nice surprise to find out that at iTech, there actually was the Rift there and I could go over and check it out. So I did. Oh, but one quick thing. The Rift and TrackIR and any other technology like that, I'm a gamer. What these things mean to me is simply they're a possibility to enhance my experience. TrackIR does that for me currently. There's various other things that, like having the monitor I have, enhances my experience. I'm willing to pay reasonable amounts of money for things that are going to enhance something that I participate in frequently. There's no real, it's tricky to say this, but there's no brand loyalty for my experience. I don't really care. If something's good, I'll say it's good. If something's bad, same story. If it's expensive but it's worth it, I'll pay the money for it. It's important to me. That end experience is what matters. So, at least from my perspective, Oculus Rift and TrackIR, if one's better than the other, so be it. There's nothing personal here. And I hope you find that this is a fair and truthful assessment of Oculus Rift as a standalone product, as well as in relationship to the current products in the same general market, which in this case for me is TrackIR. Anyhow, moving on. The Rift guys had a booth at iTech, like I said. It was just a little simple thing. They had a computer there, one of the Rift devices, and one of the Rift guys was there to talk it over. When I first got there, there was one older man sitting there using it already, and you could see the screen behind him and see what he was seeing. If you've seen screenshots of the Rift before, you'll know that it's taking the display, which currently is a 1280 by 800 resolution display, and it cuts it in half, and each half is one eye point. And within the Rift, you're seeing, your left eye sees the left half of the screen, your right eye sees the right half. by slightly separating the eye points and doing a little bit of whatever math is involved, you get a binocular stereoscopic effect. When you're looking at this on the screen, it looks really good. Obviously, you don't get the same effect as wearing it, but you're looking at this nice high-resolution screen, you're looking at it and you're thinking, hey, that's kind of interesting. I bet that looks pretty cool when you put it on. So I sat there and watched this guy use it, and he had the dude hand him a little 360 controller, and he was playing Hawken, which has support for the Rift. He was like driving his little mech around and doing stuff, and it looked neat. That's cool. So then I got my turn. I sat down, they put on the headset, adjusted the straps, and there I was in Hawken. And my very first impression, the thing that struck me instantly, was, wow, this screen is terrible. That, for me, was the most disappointing thing to find out. Of all the things I'd been concerned about, I did not anticipate a screen that would be just so horrible. I later found out the term they used to describe this is a screen door effect. I've illustrated it here, kinda. I had to blow it up a little bit so the YouTube compression wouldn't freak it out. If you check the video description, I actually have a picture that I tried to mock up showing what this is. Basically, the screen door effect is the fact that the pixels, you're looking at a magnified view of this certain resolution screen, 1280 by 800. So you blow it up, and then the pixels themselves actually have little black borders between them. You never see this on your normal screens, unless you put your nose right up to it. But on the Rift, due to that magnification, this becomes really apparent. Not just apparent, but incredibly distracting. It was disappointing. I mean, I didn't come into it with expectations about what that would look like. I just kind of hoped that what I'd seen before from these kinds of optics would more or less transfer over. The problem here, as I understand it, is that the optics, or the HMDs I've seen before, have screens that are incredibly expensive. The Rift is at a $300 price point. So you take this kind of junky little screen, you blow it up that big, and it looks terrible. It's, without question, the limiting factor of the Rift. If they can't improve the screen, it kind of doesn't matter. It's a neat novelty, but you could never play anything competitive. And by competitive, I don't mean MLG 360 no-scope. I mean, I would like an opportunity or a chance to actually win in a match that I'm playing in a given game. Let's say an FPS or whatever. The pixels are huge. The black border is really distracting. The resolution is limited. It's really unpleasant. I don't want to harp on the screen too much right now. I'd like to talk about more of it, and then we can kind of revisit some of the other aspects of the screen that, they're pros and cons, let's say. But before we move on, I just want to emphasize, this is what makes or breaks the Oculus Rift. If they can't improve the screen, in my eyes, it's a non-starter. I would never pay for it. I would never use it. It has to have a good screen. Anyway, moving on. The thing that seemed the most promising to me for the Rift, the most achievable goal, was the head tracking. And I'm happy to say the head tracking is pretty much flawless. It is insanely responsive. As I used it, I sat there and I tried to think of a way to articulate what it's like. If you use any other HMD, any other VR set, there's a latency between you moving your head and the view actually responding. This is something that's very fundamental to your perception of the world. When it happens, you don't feel immersed. It has to be as close to instantaneous as possible. Now, I don't want to throw numbers around. I heard this man talking about what the actual latencies were and the kind of technology they used, which sounded pretty clever to achieve this effect. But the point of it is it's imperceptible. It's instantaneous. The best analogy I could come up with as to how smooth it was looking around was it was kind of like if you take your hand, take your thumb and your index finger, form like an OK sign, stick it up, look at your monitor through it, right? And then move that little circle around your monitor. You're just revealing different parts of the monitor, right? You don't see the monitor's fixed in place and you're just revealing parts as you look around. That's how the Rift feels like. It feels like there's just this giant screen and you have these tiny little well, not tiny, but you have these portholes that, your vision blocks that you're looking through at this screen. And as you move around, it reveals more of it. It's like it's just so fast and so responsive that they just completely nailed that aspect of it. It's hard to explain. I hope that kind of gives it some impression of it. But the point of it is that you never felt any kind of delay or anything at all while looking around. The only time that there was any kind of problem is if the OR is not really clamped down, if the rift's not clamped down on your head, the weight of it, which is very light, by the way, the weight of it's like a non-factor. I think he said it was 300 grams, and I mean, it feels like it's comfortable. But if you sharply snap your head to one side or the other, there'd be that slight jiggle, like very almost imperceptible jiggle of the quote bulk, 300 grams, whatever, of that kind of having the inertia of that being killed. But that's really minor, and that's only for extreme sharp head movements. So I'd give them that. That's just physics. How are you gonna fix physics? I guess. So the head tracking, nailed it. It's great, extremely convincing. Works how you'd expect it to. He showed a demonstration of the drift correction. After someone's been using it for, like, let's say 5 or 10 minutes, setting it back down on the table and pressing a little drift thing. It was like recentering a track IR. It was a minor thing. I don't think you'd ever notice something like that while playing. And if it's anything like track IR, which it seemed to be, you just press the button to recenter it and you're good to go. So that's head tracking. Head tracking, that's really cool. What they said they delivered, they appear to have delivered. Next part is the 3D presentation, the stereoscopic binocular vision thing. I'm not a fan of 3D movies or 3D TVs or anything like that. It's a gimmick to me. I don't like it. I don't like the way it compromises artistic integrity by trying to jam in these stupid 3D scenes and such. But this is different. This is a game, a gaming interface. So the 3D presentation works by having each image through the SDK and through the integration with the game slightly offset, so you get the same kind of offset that you have in reality. In Hawken, there was the first game. They had two there. There was Hawken. There's a search and rescue sim from, I forget who. I play that one later. We'll talk about it in a bit. In Hawken, you're in the little mech cockpit, so you have a good constant sense of depth because the cockpit's around you, and then the outside world is outside. So in your little Hawken mech, in this one, they have like a machine gun on the left side, like a little machine gun sticking outside the cockpit on the left side, like a little rocket launcher on the right side. Looking over at them, you had a good sense that they were actually a distance away. You could, I hate to harp on it. Aside from the screen being absolutely terrible, you had an impression that they were there. If the screen was flawless, it would be incredibly convincing, I'd imagine. I'm having to extrapolate from the crap screen. But I bet it'd be even, much more immersive. But it was neat to look at the machine gun. As you fire the machine gun, you see the muzzle flash, you see the shell casings ejecting, and they all had depth to them. And you fire the rocket launcher, you'd see the smoke trail and the flame of the rocket going and hitting. And Hawken, in this, they turn like God mode. They turn on something else where you could, fly infinitely. So you'd fly around, jump around the little city environment, and everything had depth to it. It had a real nice immersive feel to it. It didn't feel like it was an eye strain. But again, take that with a grain of salt. This was a rather short usage of it. So that's effectively Hawken. So then later on, the second time when I came back to the booth, I asked to see the SAR thing. And what that was, it was a training device. I guess it was kind of oriented towards more of a military market. And the idea was you're flying in a helicopter around this oil rig that's on fire. And you're looking at stuff and pointing out danger areas or something. It didn't really matter. The point of it was it was a different environment to see it, how it worked. So in the 3D context, it was really cool because you're sitting in this helicopter. Now, granted, the Rift is only 3 degrees of freedom, so you can't move forward, left, right, up and down, all that. But you could pan around, and it felt very convincing. You could look over and see the rescue hoist and the interior of the aircraft you were flying in. And then you had that impression that the oil rig you're looking at is on fire. And there's this, it was maybe 40, 50 meters away as you circled around it. So again, 3D, very convincing. They did a good job of that. One of the things the Rift dude talked about was doing, I think it was hyperstereography or something like that. Basically where you could take, and through software, make the if I recall correctly, the term is interpupillary distance, and enhance that by extending it and get a really pronounced depth perception with that. It sounded neat. It'd be a cool thing to experiment with the tech. Now, kind of getting back to the general hardware layout of this and the screen and the more nuanced aspects of it, let's say. They said the field of view was 100 degrees, roughly 100 degrees. For me, sitting there with that on, the field of view and everything changes based on how close you can get the eye cups, I guess, to your eyes. If you have glasses, you'll probably see like a lower field of view. If you don't, I don't have glasses, you can see a larger field of view. For me, if I took my right eye and looked to the left, I would find the edge of the screen about where my nose is. And the same thing if I looked at my left eye to my right, I would see the right extend to the screen, roughly there. Some people have said that the Oculus Rift displays within your entire peripheral vision. This isn't correct. This can't be correct. The human field of view is about 180 degrees. It doesn't. It's 110-ish, 100-ish. They said 100, I've heard 110, whatever. It's somewhere in that range. It's certainly not your full peripheral. You can tell that there's a border to the screen. Now, the thing of it is, that doesn't really matter so much. It didn't bother me. The field of view is wide enough that you get a good image. If you want to see a little bit more to your left, look a little bit more to your left, right? I mean, that's kind of how these things work. Would it be nice if it was a full peripheral? Certainly. It isn't. I can live with that. As to the actual quality of the lenses, as I understand, they're using a plastic lens and they're doing software stuff to account for the distortion and whatever. The center of the lens, as you look into it, right through the center, it's clear. Again, kind of qualifying that with the fact that the screen's still terrible, so I mean, please understand, I would not be harping on that if not for the fact that the screen is actually just atrociously, horrifically, terrifyingly bad. I'm shocked I've never heard anyone say this before. I haven't watched a lot of Rift media, but I've never heard anyone kind of fully discuss the depths to which that screen is a failure. Anyway, center of the view is clear. If you keep your head pointed one direction and just pan around your eyes to look at the extent of the screen, you find that as you get away from the center, you start to get more of a blurred effect to it, presumably because of the quality of the lenses. This doesn't surprise me. This is how the other VR stuff I've used has worked. It'd be nice if they fixed it. It's not a good thing. It's something that needs improvement. I wasn't impressed with that. So basically, because of that limitation, if you want to see something clearly, you have to point your head at it. You can't point your head in the direction of the scene and then use your eyes to scan around the scene. You kind of have to keep looking with your head. For me, I find this, I mean, it's not optimal. It's kind of awkward. It's certainly not how the track eye would work. With track eye, I turn my head where I want to look, and then I use my eyes to scan around the scene. It's kind of how you do things in reality. So the Rift kind of falls a little short on that aspect of it. One of the other things that concerns me with it as a concept is that it requires 60 frames a second per eye. Now, that doesn't work out to be 120 FPS. It's just, it's all rendered. It's the way he explained it was a little more complicated. It's not that straightforward to say it's 120 FPS, but it's 60 FPS per eye. And the trick of it is that if you get below that, period, if you get below that at all, like meaning 50 FPS, whatever, the degrades the experience significantly. So if you're going to use this, you have to have games that run at 60 FPS or higher at whatever resolution. So you kind of run into this quandary. With the crap screen that it has right now and the crap resolution it has, you can reasonably expect to run pretty much anything at that frame rate. However, if you get this to a higher level, if you get this to the level at which you'd actually want to use it, and not just as a gimmick, but as an integral part of your gaming experience, you're going to have to bump the resolution up. As you bump the resolution up, 1080p, by the way, I don't think is going to be sufficient at all. That's what people are kind of saying is that, oh, well, when it gets to 1080p, suddenly that'll fix everything. I don't think so. I really strongly doubt that. I think it has to go higher to something crazier, like my monitor resolution 2560 by 1600. If you got that, I'd like to think you start getting into the area where it's convincing. But anything short of that, I'm skeptical of. But my point is you get to these resolutions that are required to make it look really good, you get harsher and harsher performance requirements. Driving any game at this resolution, at 60 FPS constant, and never having it dip under any circumstances, a little troublesome. There's not many games that can do that. So that kind of concerns me. Arma, for example, I just can't see using this in Arma. Not Arma 2, not Arma 3. I don't see it happening. And that's strictly from the frame rate perspective. If we go down to the resolution perspective, it's a total non-starter. You are a liability to your team if you're running at that resolution with that screen door effect and the blurring aspects of the lenses and so on and so forth. The thing is, with the screen, talk is cheap. It's easy to say that, oh, we're investing in higher screens. We're researching that. We're looking into a solution there. Of course you are. It's absolutely reasonable to expect that. They're aware that their screen's bad. They're aware that for this to be successful in the commercial market, there's one of two things has to happen. One is it has to be hyped to hell, and everyone has to just buy into it without, sight unseen. Or, the better way, in my opinion, is to actually make it the product that it needs to be, which is having that very nice, sexy, high-res screen that doesn't have this crippling screen door effect, with nicer lenses that don't have that blurring distortion, and have it sell for what it is. But I don't know. I don't see any example of this high-res screen. If you go to a trade show like iTech and you're appealing to this giant military market where you potentially make untold numbers of sales, you bring the best you can possibly can. This is what they brought. This is how the screen was. It wasn't sufficient. If they had a better one, I think they would have shown it. So I think a lot of people are going to kind of hand wave this and say that, oh well, it's not a problem. By the time it ships for real, they'll have a proper screen. And I don't believe that. I'm going to be skeptical of that. And I would encourage everyone else to be skeptical. I would also strongly encourage you that before you purchase one of these, you have a look through one of them and see if you can live with that. I can tell you flat out, as much as I think the 3D aspect of it is amazing, and I can completely see that being cool for things like the DCS series or Arma or flying around, or I mean, it's probably pretty cool as infantry as well. I just didn't have an opportunity to see that in the demos, but I can kind of mentally extrapolate it, and I think it'd be neat. But mostly in like aircraft where you have that the depth perception is so critical. I think that's great, and the head tracking is great. All those aspects that I've seen, like the weight of it, everything about it, except for that damn screen, is really cool. So I hope that they're going to resolve that, but I'm really skeptical of it because if they could, I think they already would have. And if they do, I think it's going to change the price point. I can't imagine a $300 product like this having a really compelling screen. Now, with that being said, I think it'd be quite cool if they offered this in tiers. Maybe there's some people that don't care about having this really nice screen. Maybe they can accept that screen door effect. Whatever. If you can work with that, more power to you. Maybe there's applications where it just doesn't matter as much. For them, produce an option that has the lower fidelity screen. For other people like myself, I'd be willing to pay quite a bit of money to have a really sexy, nice screen coupled with this. Anyhow, so that's the screen. Now, as to the question I'm asked, which is the TrackIR versus Oculus Rift, what do I think of that? Well, okay, the positives of the TrackIR is that you can use your existing screen and all the perks that come with that. For example, I have a Dell U3011 monitor. It's a 30-inch, 2560 by 1600 monitor with great color quality, beautiful resolution. I love it to death. It was a great investment for me. So TrackIR allows me to take advantage of that. TrackIR is less expensive by at least half or more depending on how you purchase it. For me, the TrackIR plus the little Track Clip Pro, which I have attached to my headset, is unobtrusive. It's just always there. When I put my headphones on, it's part of it. I don't have to wear goggles. I can still see around me. It's a very natural, streamlined thing. The TrackIR device that sits on your monitor is a non-factor. It's like 2 inches tall, if that. TrackIR has the 6 degrees of freedom, while the Rift has 3. Now, you don't necessarily use all these all the time, but there's some products where it's very important. DCS, for example, makes very good use of the 6 degree of freedom when you're moving around the cockpit, checking your dials and gauges and flipping switches and stuff, and it's a cool aspect of it. Now, that can be, in theory, added to the Oculus Rift in the future, but it's not now. And I can't judge it based on future promises. I have to judge it as it is, the way I experience it. So, TrackIR has more degrees of freedom. And those are kind of the key positives for TrackIR in this little competition. Now, the Oculus Rift, the primary positives there is that the 3D effect is really convincing. Because it's a goggle system, you can do this. TrackIR can't do that because that's not what it's going for. That's not how it works. You could pair TrackIR with a 3D monitor or whatever. I've never used one. I can't really comment to how convincing that is. But that's like an upgrade path if you want to take it. Oculus Rift is designed around that concept, so they'll probably do it better. Just guessing. The Rift has fantastic tracking and responsiveness. The predictive methods they use for that are quite cool. One thing you have to mention here is that the Rift is also a 1-to-1 tracking ratio. So as I move my head 20 degrees, I get 20 degrees of response. TrackIR doesn't work that way. TrackIR is I move my head, let's say 5 degrees, and I get 60 degrees of reaction. So of course the Oculus Rift is going to have a bit more inherent smoothness and stability there because it's using a much greater range of motion to achieve that effect. TrackIR accounts for this by having smoothing, acceleration curves, and that sort of stuff, which you can also turn into a 1-to-1 ratio if you want. So, but it's not quite the same. But anyway, Oculus Rift, The 3D effect's amazing. The tracking's fantastic. Those are the big positives. The tracker negatives, like I said, there's no 3D. I guess a slight negative would just be the way that it does things differently. Like I said, it's not a one-to-one tracking system unless you want it to be. You could call that a negative, I suppose. It's a difference. It's like it's 6 of one and a half dozen of another. You can't really say it's better or worse. It's just different. That's a difference between them. Now, as to the Rift's negatives, guess what the first one is? Very first thing I saw when I put one on, the screen. Oh my God, it's so bad. God, it's so frustratingly bad. It's the biggest problem. It's what holds it back. The field of view, I'd have to do a 1-to-1 to really figure it out. I assume the field of view is bigger. It seems to be bigger. So, I don't know. It's different. One potential negative, I can't talk to this myself because I didn't use it for that period of time. But I would be curious as to what kind of eye fatigue you get over extended play sessions. I don't know. I'm curious. Like I said earlier, it's only 3 degrees of freedom. That's not bad, and it does it very well, but it is a limitation. One clear one is that even as it is right now with its junk screen, it's more expensive by twice. I think it's safe to imagine that if a higher quality screen is introduced, price is probably going to jump accordingly. I think that's probably pretty fair to say. So in summation, I suppose, the differences between the two is that the track IR gives you the ability to look around and do so without needing to put on goggles or have unusual restrictions like not being able to see the world around you. Oculus Rift gives you more immersion in theory because of the 3D effect, and the fact that it's 1-to-1 tracking probably makes it easier for people to pick up, but the screen is such a limiting factor that it's not viable for gaming. You would just get murdered, just brutally murdered if you try to use this in any kind of team versus team or competitive nature. So I think that was basically some of my thoughts on the Rift. I think it's really cool. This is something that's worth supporting. For all the negative I say about the screen, I mean, pay attention. The only thing that's negative about it is the screen. The core technology, the concept, the 3D, the head tracking, all of that, it's awesome. It's great. If you could make the screen not suck terribly, it would be worth getting. I would love to experience games in this kind of capacity. I'd love to see what if I could have the same visual fidelity that I have through my monitor in an HMD like that, I mean, that's the dream. It's going to take time to get there. It's probably going to take years to get there. But this is a step in the right direction. I'm glad it's happening. The marketing side of it, the hype and the marketing, I don't know. It bothers me a little. It's dishonest to kind of gloss over the fact that it's as unusable as it is right now because of that screen. Like, let's continue talking about the screen. In that oil rig demo I talked about, you had people running around as there's fire and stuff spreading. And I said it's not far, it's maybe 40 or 50 meters away. That's what it felt like. So a person at 40 or 50 meters is a pretty big object. In the Rift, looking at them, I couldn't make out their faces. I couldn't really see the details of their clothes. There's a lot of detail that's missing at that low resolution, and especially with that screen door effect on it. I guess maybe I should have just titled this video Oculus Rift. Fucked by the screen. So anyway, conclusion. Rift will be cool in the future someday when the screen is up to the task. Right now, it's a cool proof of concept, and it's inspiring the industry to kind of pay more attention to this concept. Maybe work further in this direction. It's not there yet. I don't know when it'll be there. And I would caution everyone to be very skeptical of people who try to downplay the significance of that terrible, terrible screen, or the possibility of there being a magical fairy tale solution to it while retaining that $300 price point. Anyhow, thank you for listening. I hope this has been a somewhat interesting look at this technology. This was in May. The trade show, iTech, was the 22nd of May until the 24th. If I recall correctly, I saw it on the 23rd and the 24th. So this should have been the latest generation of the technology. I look forward to seeing it improve, however long that might take. So that wraps us up. This is dslyecxi. Until next time, take care.